Can you sell a home in California that has tenants while going through the probate process? The short answer, yes. And we can end the video right there. But if you'd like to know how, keep watching. Hey there, I'm Lisa Kwashnick, and I'm a realtor based right here in the Sacramento area, and I'm also a certified probate and trust specialist. If you have a renter living in a property you're looking to sell during a probate process, it can make the already complex process even more complicated. It's important to consider that the tenant calls the property their home and they have legal rights in this situation. Having a tenant can be an advantage for some buyers, but it can deter others. Jim and I recently helped a gentleman sell 3 properties in Sacramento County. All had tenants. One of the tenants had a month-to-month lease and the others had longer rental agreements. And while we marketed the properties for sale, we had to be very respectful of the tenants' right to peaceably live in their home while helping our client get what he wanted. There was a property manager that was involved too, and he was upset that the properties were being sold, but we were able to work with the tenants to schedule showings and match a buyer for each one of the properties. One of the first things to consider is if the tenant is interested in buying the property. That's one of the first questions I ask when working with executors or administrators and there is a tenant in place. And we can work with the tenant in getting them qualified for a loan and walk through the steps of a purchase. In some cases, it may be best to have the tenants move out before marketing the property. This may mean that you need to wait until the end of the rental agreement, letting the tenants know that you won't be renewing their lease because you'll be selling the property. In this situation, you'll still need to provide the tenants with a notice to vacate or a notice to quit. And depending on how long the tenant has been in the property, a 30-day notice or a 60-day notice to quit would be required for a tenant that is on a month-to-month lease. It's always best to check with local laws regarding tenants' rights before starting down this path. In other cases, you may be able to negotiate a lease buyout with a tenant if you'd like them to vacate prior to their lease ending. A lot of times, tenants don't want to have their lives disrupted with showings and inspections, and they may be open to a lease buyout. In this case, you would offer the tenants cash for keys, but be sure to have everything in writing and signed by all parties, including everyone that is residing in the property that is over the age of 18. If a tenant is not interested in or is not able to move out before their rental agreement is ending, then the legal agreement needs to be honored. Our goal will always be to have a smooth transaction, and we found that one of the best ways to ensure this is to keep everyone informed, especially the tenants. They're going to be very nervous about the disruption in their life, and the more we keep them informed, the less anxiety they seem to have about the whole situation. And by assessing whether the tenant is happy and cooperative, well, this can significantly impact the process. When you have a property that's listed for sale, it's usually best to have the property available to show on a moment's notice. The reason for this is because home buyers have different schedules. Some work evenings, some are 9 to 5, some buyers are relocating from other areas and are only available to come into town for 2 to 3 days to look at homes. But when there's a tenant living in the property, a minimum 24-hour notice may be required. It's helped when we've sat down with the tenants to work out a showing schedule before we even market the property for sale. Just like home buyers, you may have a tenant who has a complicated work schedule. Think of someone who's a first responder, like a law enforcement officer, a paramedic, or a firefighter. It always helps to work with a tenant to come up with a plan or a schedule to have the home available to show. We can then put that showing schedule into our MLS, and we utilize a software that will notify the tenant of any showings or inspections via their choice of email, a phone call, or a text message. It's also important to consider whether the tenant will maintain the property to attract potential buyers. A well-kept property shows better and is more likely to sell at a higher price. A non-cooperative tenant can be a significant obstacle. Selling a property with a tenant in a probate process is possible. However, it doesn't mean it's always the best choice. It's going to be important to weigh the pros and cons, Consider the terms of the tenancy, whether it's a month-to-month or a long-term lease, and how much time is left on the lease. Additionally, think about the market price and the preferences of potential buyers. Investors might be interested in properties with long-term tenants, while families may prefer vacant homes. We need to work through the numbers to make an informed decision. In areas with a high number of renters, investors may pay market value for the property and continue renting it. However, for families looking to move in, having a tenant in place would be problematic. If the tenant is uncooperative, it's essential to address the situation. In cases where it's better to sell without the tenant, you may have to negotiate or offer the cash for keys agreement. But again, make sure everything is in writing to avoid any complications. Check local laws to understand your rights and obligations when dealing with tenants. Sometimes it's essential to wait out the lease if an agreement can't be reached. Unless the buyer agrees to have the tenant stay in place, most of the time you'll want the property to be vacant upon closing escrow to avoid any complications for the new buyer. It's important to ensure a smooth transaction for all parties involved. Thank you for joining me today. If this was helpful, I'd love it if you like this video. Leave a comment, subscribe to our channel, hit the bell button. We post a new video each week, all created to help executors and administrators in the Sacramento area. Have a great day, and I'll see you in the next video.